Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 125, Setting Loving Limits with Loved Ones. So as you know, this month we're going to be focusing on the upcoming holiday season and how it can bring us face to face with some difficult things, be it grieving losses of family members, and this being your first holiday, to not having the people around that you love, or having to spend time with people who you love, but they can be rather challenging. And that's kind of where we're going to focus today. We're going to talk about setting loving limits or healthy boundaries. And I put the word loving in there, and that's because boundaries are not about control. Control is you're trying to change their behavior, trying to get them to be different. Healthy boundaries are we let people know where we are, the ball goes to them, and they get to choose, as you often hear me say. So self-care requires us taking responsibility for setting boundaries for ourselves. They are not setting boundaries on other people like we just described. So when I say setting boundaries, I simply mean we let others know ahead of time, what we are able and willing to do and what we are not able or willing to do. And it doesn't have to be about them. Control means we lash out, we get angry, we get upset with them because they can't be different. And you might be right in wishing them to be different. Maybe they're passive aggressive, or they guilt you, or they manipulate you, or they rage at you, or they shut down and punish you when you don't do what they want. Like you don't visit enough, or you don't want to come home this Christmas. When we set boundaries and we let people know where we are and what our choices are, we then let go. We're going to talk about that today, that you can't do healthy boundary work without also doing detachment and empathy work as well. They all work together. So what you're willing and able to do and what you're not willing or able to do this time, because it doesn't have to be forever. And here's the thing, it's really none of their business as to your why behind it all, unless you feel like it's the right thing to do to share it. And every situation is different, and sometimes we figure it out the hard way. With really controlling people and manipulative people, I think, tend to use this vulnerable information against you later, then probably just giving them your bottom line and telling them less is probably better. They're going to want to know more. In fact, if they really want to pound on you, they're going to want 52 valid reasons why you can't come for Thanksgiving or why you need to go home early. I have to wonder if they really want to know, or do they just want to lash out at you because they're hurt, or manipulate you into backpedaling and backing down. They can want to know all they want, but it doesn't mean we need to tell them. Sometimes we might choose. Like maybe you just want to, I don't know, go somewhere with your boyfriend for a Christmas holiday, and you choose to tell your mom that because you think she deserves to know, right? And it's not that you don't want to see her for Christmas per se, you just really had an invitation to go do something great. So that's a really good situation where if mom doesn't manipulate and guilt and harass you with a million questions or try to make you feel like crap, then that would be a time where you would probably want to share with her, hey, Mom, I want you to know that I would love to spend Christmas with you, but we're going to be a little late because we're going on this thing. So you get to choose how much you want to reveal. So when we talk about loving limits, I think it is helpful to focus on a few things to make sure that we are doing it in the most grounded, confident, but loving way that we can. So in terms of what is within our control, we can try to lessen the anxiety and the resentment and the anger and the angst that can come along with unhealthy conflict when we try to ask for what we need. First thing we want to do when we approach a family member is to try to show empathy, compassion, and understanding the best you can. This can take some work, especially if that person isn't terribly healthy or has been really selfish and hasn't shown that they care too much about what you need right now. Pull it from some orifice, just try to put yourself in their shoes. What might you be feeling if your child or your sister or your friend did not want to come for a holiday gathering, let's say, or didn't feel like hosting the gathering because they wanted to take care of themselves this year? So try to put yourself in their shoes for a moment. This requires working through some of your own emotional stuff around it before you tell them. If you don't feel peaceful, it's not time yet. You still have some work to do. Because lashing out defensively is not okay. It's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do them any good. And it's not going to resolve anything. When we lash out, we're pretty much giving the message that we don't know how to take care of ourselves in a healthier way. We don't know how to do boundary work. And finally, they deserve to at least hear what they want and need is okay, and that's theirs, and it's not your place to judge either. You can think and feel whatever you want about it, but just like you don't want someone coming up to you and judging what you want and need and feel at the holidays, it's not our place to do it to them either. That's about them. And most importantly, detachment and empathy require us to remember that that's about them. We can make it about us, but that's our stuff. If we can't handle that they feel that way, if we're angry that they're acting that way. So empathy and compassion and understanding, you don't pick up the phone, you don't call them or text them, you don't talk to them until you have come to a peaceful solution for yourself. The next thing we want to make sure we do is give them your bottom line. Focus on what matters most. You don't have to tell a big backstory. Again, some people deserve the details, and I think some don't, based upon their previous or current behavior. Those with poor boundaries, it's probably not a good idea because they can't let that be about you, and they're probably going to throw it back in your face either immediately or later. This is vulnerable information that we're giving someone, like what we need to do to take care of ourselves, let's say. How we're feeling burnt out and tired, we don't want everyone over for Thanksgiving. That's a vulnerable piece of information that can quickly be used against you, and you can be called selfish, or they can mock you, or somehow invalidate how you feel. The other reason why we want to stick to the bottom line is you don't want to get into a back and forth about the details as to why you need what you need, or why your boundary is what your boundary is. That's manipulation, folks. They want to get you to explain it 5 more times because they're pretending, quote unquote, that they just don't understand. And if you hear the phrase, I just don't understand, you let that go. That's about them. They either can't metabolize reality or they're trying to manipulate you. Either way, that's not your stuff. And it's not like you're not going to take the bait and step in and explain it again. I just want to talk about it so you're aware of that. There's no need for that. If you said something with emotional honesty and directness and clarity, and you even repeated yourself once, let's say, and they didn't get it, drop the ball. Because now it's turned into something other than a healthy conversation. So give them your bottom line and stick to that. The final thing we want to make sure we do is to detach with loving compassion as best we can, allowing them to have their process. They're working through, perhaps, of difficult feelings and thoughts. Maybe they're disappointed. Maybe your mom feels rejected. Maybe they're worried about what they're going to do now that you've changed things this year. What if you're not coming for Christmas and they don't have a lot of support in their life? That's a big one I run into all the time. My clients will say, but Mary, they don't have a lot of people. And I say, well, some of that's within their control, and that is their stuff, their consequences. Maybe they've run people out of their life. Maybe they need to go to therapy and figure out how to have healthy friendships. It's not your job necessarily to take care of their social life and their well-being. It's their responsibility to not be so dependent upon you to feel okay. Now, there are special circumstances. My argument is, even if you have an elderly parent who isn't feeling well, where is their support system outside of you? Because they need to cultivate that. We all need to cultivate our own. So their thoughts, their feelings, their needs, and their behaviors are theirs, not yours. Doing the who owns what here and talking it over with someone can be really helpful to clarify that maybe your guilt is unearned. And maybe it's hard for you to differentiate yourself from them. You feel responsible for their feelings and their well-being, and that's a boundary issue. And we need people reminding us over and over again that we're not awful, and it's okay for us to say no, for us to make changes, or ask for what we need. The bottom line is that healthy boundaries draw lines around you, around your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, and your choices, which are yours and not about anyone else. They can impact others, of course, but they have their own feelings around your choices, and that's not yours either. That's about them, and it's not your business. You can care about hurting your mom's feelings, but you're not responsible for what she does to take care of her feelings. I think detachment work is probably the hardest part of boundary work. Letting go of control over what's going to happen, reminding yourself you did or you're doing the right thing, and that you're not a horrible person just because you said no. Letting go is hard, especially if you're dealing with people who they themselves can't let go, and they cling to that enmeshment. They don't want to know where they end and you begin. It's too terrifying for them. And if you're the first one to set boundaries in your boundaryless family, oh boy, you're going to be brave, you're going to be okay, but it's going to be hard. You're going to need a lot of support, a lot of talking it out 10 times with people around you who can remind you you're not a jerk and it's okay and it's better that you're doing this. And that's about your mom and dad, and has nothing to do with you, that kind of thing. Your brain needs to reprogram. If we didn't grow up with healthy boundaries in the family and detachment, we're going to think it's really odd and uncaring and selfish. So, some things to remember. You are not powerful enough to ruin anyone's holiday or their life by just saying no or asking for what you need. Especially if you're trying to do it in a mutually beneficial way where you're trying to negotiate something, let's say. You don't have that kind of power, and you don't have that control. So just remember that and keep reminding yourself of that. If you hear that it's so awful and you're ruining everyone's holiday, just hang up the phone. No, I'm kidding. Just stop there for a moment and say, whoa. I'm dealing with someone who has no boundaries and who's trying to decimate me for saying no. That's what I'm dealing with here. Detaching from other people's their unhealthy behavior is key. Not that you don't have your hurt around their behavior. You do. And your disappointment and your anger and your frustration and your sadness. There's grief work here to do, guys. We're grieving what we wish we had, but also looking at what our expectations are of people who, if they could do better, they would do better, but they're not ready to right now. And we have to accept that or come to acceptance around that. The other thing you want to try to do, I think, is be as proactive as you can in letting others know what you've decided, especially when it comes to this time of year. There's travel involved. People are trying to make their plans. And so when we're doing this healthy boundary work, it requires us in turn to respect their boundaries and their ability to make choices. So give others as much heads up as you would want so that they have time and space to make good choices for themselves. If you wait till the last minute and do a drive-by, which I think is unfair and unhealthy, and now they perhaps don't have time to make other plans for Thanksgiving, that's not fair. That's not really considerate. And so we just want to try to be as proactive as we can. Now, when you first start doing boundary work, you're probably going to do some last minute nasty, oh, I'm sorries. And you're going to feel pretty awful about it. Try not to. Really try to take responsibility. Grab the courage. Because that's what it is. When we wait till the 11th hour, it's because we're hemming and hawing, we're back and forth, we're conflicted, and we don't have the courage to just pick up the phone and say, I can't come home for Christmas. Or I don't have the money to buy 10 gifts for my sister. That's why we do that, guys. But we really want to work towards not doing that. Try to suck it up also if you signed up for something and you're getting to the 11th hour and you realize, uh-oh, I probably should have said no. Unless it's a toxic situation, try to suck it up because this can actually be a powerful motivator to think things through next time before you say yes, right? So maybe you work more on hesitating to say yes and say, hey, can I think about it? That way it's less likely for you to have to change your mind at the last minute. So we want to avoid conflict, and oftentimes we procrastinate, but we really want to try not to. Try to be respectful. You know, if we're trying to show our family that we have healthy boundaries, we have to recognize that they have the same rights as we do. And we want to give them what we want to receive, which is being respectful. The other thing it'll do is keep you from that 22 days of misery that you have to sit in. You guys know what I'm talking about, where you feel anxious and frustrated and probably even resentful that you even have to go. I mean, just all this stuff that we act out, as opposed to if you had ripped the Band-Aid off in the beginning in September and said, look, I don't know if I can be there. And yeah, it blows up or whatever happens. But the more often you rip that Band-Aid off quicker, the better it's going to feel. Another thing to think about is to really look at our expectations. Are they realistic? You know, when you start getting healthier and doing the work, you naturally want healthier from them and for them, right? But we got to get into reality. You don't want to go home for Thanksgiving and be a walking self-help book. You can share your joy, you can model healthy, but then let go. I also want to mention, probably going to be more frustrating if you have started doing a lot of work on yourself, because you're really going to go home and see the contrast, perhaps, between healthy and unhealthy. And it might be more difficult than it was last year, and that's normal. Another thing you probably want to do is, if there are upsetting topics, like politics is one that comes to mind, maybe things about your life that aren't their business, try to just change the subject or say, I just don't want to talk about that. Don't bring things up that you want to change about them. What is your agenda? What are you really trying to do? And why bother? Accept that the only thing that you can control is your reaction, how you respond. Try to hold on to your sanity and don't take the bait when it's offered. And if you do, forgive yourself and change the subject or run to the bathroom or do whatever you need to do. Focus on your own behavior as best you can. I'm saying as best you can today because this probably is not going to be easy. We talked last week about being pulled back into a younger age, that regression that can happen when we go home. Some of that's going to happen. If you've just started doing the work, this is going to be a work in progress, and it's okay. But know that boundary work often means we're setting boundaries with ourselves as well. That we bring it back to what's going on with us and we take our eyes off them and let them deal with themselves. Other boundaries we can talk about are time and energy boundaries. And so getting away for moments to collect yourself, to regroup and reground can really be helpful. It limits your exposure to toxicity in the kitchen, right? It helps you get back to yourself and go breathe and get some fresh air and remind yourself of who you are. It does a lot of great things. You can check in via phone or text or video with friends when you go do that who can support you, which can really be helpful. If you really need to limit your exposure, I tell clients this all the time. If you can afford it, if it's possible, get a hotel room. You don't have to stay at the house if you don't want to and if you have other resources. Just because they want you to stay or just because you did that for the last 5 years doesn't mean you don't get to change it up. People tell me just having the option or being able to have some peace when they go back to their room at night meant all the difference, especially if they had to travel far to see family and they're there for several days. Having a few escape hatch options really helps because you don't have to feel so trapped or anxious or resentful. So think about things ahead of time that you can go do. Plug in going for a walk, going for exercise, having to get some work done, whatever you need to do. And negotiate when you need to be in the kitchen to help per se, or at a certain event at a certain time. Negotiate that out ahead of time the best you can. Now, you're going to be approaching some conflict probably when you do that. But again, better to do that than waiting till after you get there. I don't think that's really fair. I think it's good to let people know ahead of time so they know what they should expect as well. And it gives you an opportunity to negotiate some things out with them, hopefully. So I want to finish out this session with what I call a holiday bill of rights. And it was funny, when I was putting this together, I went online and there are some other ones out there. So obviously other people had the same great idea and that's cool. These are just some things that I was thinking would be good for us to focus on. Just to remind yourself, and this is one of the bonus downloads in the newsletter. So you can go ahead and download that and print it out if you need it. All right. First one is, you do have the right to remain silent about your vulnerable feelings if it's not safe, because things can and will be used against you later if those folks are really unhealthy. You have a right to set boundaries with anyone at any time about anything. Your boundaries are your business. It's not controlling or selfish to set limits for yourself. Only manipulative, emotionally immature others will accuse you of such. Boundaries are the opposite of control. Controlling is being people-pleasing and then hating them later for it. You have the right to celebrate your holidays however you choose, with whomever you choose to celebrate with. Just because you always did, or that's what you've always done, doesn't mean you have to still want to, and you're not a horrible person because you've changed your mind. You have the right to choose for yourself and allow others to have their choices if those are different from yours. If we are being punished for our choices, we are a hostage in an unhealthy relationship. You have the right to feel whatever you feel, and no one has a right to tell you not to feel something or to feel something that you don't. You have the right to need what you need. Emotional, physical, spiritual, and psychological needs are very real and are not wants. They're necessary. You have the right to seek support, encouragement, and even solace if holidays are hard for you. Just because others may want different for you doesn't mean it's necessarily what you need right now. You have the right to take really good care of yourself this holiday season. Adding in some downtime, some adventure, some comfort is a good thing, and it's not selfish at all. In fact, others will enjoy your company more, not less, when you take good care of you. You have the right to change your mind. Yes, you do, at any moment. Of course, like we talked about, it's best to do so with consideration of others. But especially if you are just now working on honoring yourself, you may have to change a yes into a no, and that's okay. Or maybe you finally heard your heart's desire after the fact, and you need to make it right and go back and say yes. And finally, you have the right to walk away, remove yourself, or leave the dinner early if you are being mistreated. Yes, it will hurt that you will have to lose out on dessert too, but doing so quietly yet firmly is how you take care of yourself. So those are some rights that you have and that we all have. And it's good to remember that as we try to honor our own, that we focus this holiday season as well on trying to be respectful of others' choices, other people's boundaries, what they're telling us that they need, and having a mature response when it bumps up against what we would rather have. So the work is both. We practice saying no to others or asking for what we need, as well as practicing honoring the same for them and trying to be as vulnerable and as emotionally honest and respectful and practice healthy detachment with them. So today we explored some things to consider about setting healthy boundaries for yourself this holiday season. We talked about honoring what you need, how to detach with love, and allow others to have their process as well. And finally, we talked about your holiday bill of rights to get you focused on self-care. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it was helpful. May you stay serene and grounded. Keep holding on to hope. Focus on detachment this week and honoring others the best you can. If you want the bonus download Bill of Rights, check the show notes at ownitpowercast.com and sign up for the newsletter. That comes out each Tuesday and has everything that you need. All right, so pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.